Well, hey, listeners, Dina thinks that you do not need to eat fat during exercise, whereas I think you do. Who's right?
You're so edgy, Bob.
A little edgy today, this
I'm on
morning.
the seat of my what? I'm on the hot seat. No, I'm
Yeah,
on the edge of my seat. That's
edge of
what I
your
meant to
seat
say.
of your pants, hot seat. Yeah, there's a couple of those.
Okay, there are a number of practitioners who work in sports nutrition who are carbs, all carbs, everything carbs, and
Yeah.
we're not expanding out of the box. That's that. We have some differences of opinion. However, I would think most of us could appreciate what is the context of consideration for consuming fat during exercise, what kind of athlete, what kind of sport, what's your GI tolerance, yada, yada. Should we go on about like all the things to help us make that decision? So when you introed it like that, Bob, I mean, I would say generally it's probably not my first go-to fuel source to consume during exercise, but I will add my disclaimer, like, actually, we can eat some fat, but what's our context?
Yes, yes. And that's kind of why I want to open it like that because it is all about context, isn't it? I mean, I feel like any macronutrient during exercise that you're thinking about consuming, it has some context behind it. But that said, no, there's not a right or wrong, like, oh yeah, yes or no. It's not black or white here, right? It's
Yeah.
very there's kind of a big gray area with this. So I think let's start the context maybe just in like why? Like why would you eat fat? Or why wouldn't you eat fat? And remember, we're talking during exercise. We're not talking about
During,
during the day or anything like that. Just like you are exercising, you are sweating, your heart rate's up,
yeah.
and that's where this comes into play.
Yeah. Is there a time and a place, right, for consuming
Yeah.
fat? So I tend to think about those longer distance, maybe more on the low, moderate heart rate type efforts. So I think of ultra running, I think of multi-day fast packing, I think bike packing, racing the planet kind of stuff where you're just out for a lot of hours. There's still individual differences in that performance element, but trying to only eat carbohydrate, we're going to get hungry for
Oh
one
my
thing.
gosh. Yeah.
And so I think of fat as a way, and of course, we have different options for fat sources, but I think of fat as something that can kind of help satisfy. And it
Yeah.
might be something you crave a little bit. Of course, there's the protein piece, but I think of those kind of situations, Bob, where it's not like we might be gnawing on butter sticks, but it could be in a food to help just make it a more complete calorie source, give us some more calories per ounce or per serving, and just help keep, the overall momentum going.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to bring up too. And you're spot on with that. Like usually longer distances, and even like if listeners, if you've had your metabolic efficiency tested, and you were fortunate to have a metabolic efficiency point, basically we're talking about any exercise that is under your metabolic efficiency point. So that's usually like a zone one, zone two. But listen, not everyone has a metabolic efficiency point, so we can't just blatantly say that. But
Yeah.
no, to your point too, D, I want to bring up like with ultra distant stuff, even if it's just hiking multiple days or backpacking, right? You don't want to carry a lot of weight. So
Yeah.
fat actually, like you were getting to, fat contributes more than double the amount of calories than carbs or protein. So it makes sense sometimes to include that. Again, not like taking a stick of butter or lard or anything, but including that. And didn't, I remember there's a race and I forgot what it is, but I think you did it, didn't you? Where they mandate you have X amount of calories at all times on you. And for weight purposes, I heard back in the days, oop, check, a lot of athletes were literally just carrying olive oil just
Yeah.
to because it was lighter, right? And they didn't want to
Yeah.
carry a lot.
No, I mean, that's, yeah, like those nut butters, the all pure fat olive
Yeah.
oil or something
Yeah.
like that, where if in a bind, yeah, you have those extra calories, but it didn't add that much weight
Right.
to your person.
Yeah.
So I think there's very good cases for this utility, not only for like safety and emergency purposes for those ultra things, but could be certainly helpful in a number of other instances we hadn't, forecasted.
Yeah, and I do want to pick, we won't get too much in the science weeds, but I do want to pick apart fats in a few minutes. But let's talk on the opposite side of things. So we talked about kind of the longer, the under the metabolic efficiency point, low to moderate intensity, zone one, zone two, however we qualify it. What about like the higher intensities though? Like maybe it's team sports, maybe it's endurance sports where they're finishing under 2 hours, but the intensity is higher than their metabolic efficiency point or they're in that zone three, zone four. Should we be eating fat during those type of sessions?
Oh, wow.
Ooh.
I could see still a case for that, but I think maybe for our higher, there's always the outliers,
There are.
right,
Yeah.
Bob? I mean,
Yeah.
I was going to say for some of the higher elite performers, professionals, top of the top, maybe don't use your calorie sources from a fat, but then I instantly think of a couple high performers who are on that side and do okay.
Yeah. They're
But
they're definitely outliers,
yeah,
right? But what you're saying with that specific population is their physiology is a little bit different than ours,
yeah,
right? So when you're a
yeah,
high level, high performance athlete, elite athletes, your physiology is different. So you
yeah,
can actually usually assimilate carbohydrates a little bit easier.
yeah,
But again, outliers, 2 to 3%, we get that.
yeah,
I think it comes down, like if you're going to ask me that same question, D, I'd be
yeah,
like, well, it probably not, but it kind of
yeah,
depends on the type of fats because this is where we get a little bit into the weeds, right? So
yeah. Oh,
it's
huh.
it's a tricky one, right? And I'm not going to try to give a science lesson, but and I off the top of my head, I didn't think I was going to talk about this, but we've actually did an episode regarding this way back when. But if we look at the different type in the lengths of fatty acids and the amount of carbons that are on them. Stick with me, listeners. I'm not going too deep here, I promise.
This is good.
There are short chain, medium chain, and long chain fats.
Yes.
Now, the long chain fats are usually the fats that we're consuming throughout the day, right? Your oils and your butters and your nuts and just it's like daily stuff, right? That that digests traditionally, right? So it takes a little bit longer to digest. It's a little bit harder on the system sometimes, especially if you're exercising. But my whole point here is the medium chain triglycerides. Those, and there's only four of them, those actually are much faster to digest because it bypasses the liver. So it doesn't
Yeah.
have to go through the liver, which means these MCTs, that's listeners, what you probably have heard these referred to, they are stored closer to the mitochondria. That is our energy powerhouse. That's where we make ATP, and they can actually be used as energy much faster. So this is where I kind of get into the it depends. That's our
Yeah.
favorite saying, right? It depends because if
Yeah.
the fat is an MCT, medium chain triglyceride, maybe some shorter distance or
Uh-huh.
higher intensity athletes could use it.
Yes, that's a really
Yeah.
good point, Bob. The MCT oil,
Hmm.
definitely have seen some cases where that has been helpful.
Yeah.
So that is another example of the source matters in the context too of the intensity
Yep.
or tolerance, maybe carbohydrate sensitive, so
Yeah.
on.
Can we talk about the tolerance really quick? Because what you
Yeah,
just said, the tolerance of fat and carbohydrate tolerance or intolerance, I've actually seen, because I work with a lot of athletes with GI distress, I've seen that sometimes simple carbohydrates could actually trigger GI distress. So maybe some fat could be better. But on the other hand, I've also seen fat trigger GI distress. And remember, listeners, we're talking about during exercise
yeah,
when blood flow is decreased in the gut. It's very hard to digest, foods and calories. So we don't have a definitive answer for you. We just want to
yeah,
kind of present both sides because it will come down to N of one, of course. But
yeah,
here's another thing to think about is if you are thinking about this, because you know how like you train with someone or like you read things, you're like, wow, that ultra runner they did what? Maybe I should try that. We all know we do it, but please, listeners, don't do it within about 3 months of your race or your competition. We want you, if you're trying this, if you're like, you know what, maybe adding some fat to my exercise, training, nutrition makes sense, please do it at least 3, 4, 5 months before your competition because literally your digestive system may rebel at first. And you don't want that to happen too close to your event. I've
yeah,
had athletes do that, unfortunately, D, which
yeah,
I'm sure you have too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, also, in just the context of like our menstruating athletes who
Oh,
maybe have
yeah.
some like serious PMS
Hmm.
times of the cycle, and like anything and everything just sets off the gut.
Oh,
It's like, oh, and you're also planning, let's say, a long run in, your higher hormone phase. And then you're like, ooh, I'm going to try this coconut oil thing.
yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're hitting the trees or the bushes for a little bathroom break.
Yeah.
So just your own, like you're saying, your N of one timing at what's going on with you acutely or in life. I mean, sometimes just stress, right, Bob, or
Hmm.
these things that
Hmm.
poor sleep, and then you combine all these variables, and our system is just putting the brakes on.
And you
So,
sometimes you don't know what really pisses it off,
yeah,
right? So if
yeah,
you're throwing everything at it at once, like you set up that scenario with that female, I was like, oh my gosh, how is she going to know what thing was it,
yeah,
right? She might go to
yeah,
the fat source, but maybe it wasn't the fat source. Like, you don't,
right.
there's so many dependent variables thrown in that mix.
True, true.
Can I just can I give a shameless plug really quick, D? Do you
Yeah,
mind? So
love.
I think we all know that I have a snack company, All Around Snack Co., right? And I've started, I actually years ago I started making energy butter. So this is like a nut butter, right? But mostly because some endurance athletes, ultra endurance athletes too, were using my energy bites, which are just these, and you've had these before, these gorgeous little squares of just heaven that have, wholesome ingredients, no artificial stuff in them at all. But some guys and girls were like, "Oh, hey, we're using those in the summer and they're melting." I'm like, "Oh yeah, well, they're really not made for that." But okay, so then I'm like, "Oh, Mr. Smarty Pants was like, oh, I'll just make them, liquidy and
Yeah,
turn them into a butter." But here's my point. Besides the shameless plug, my energy butter. So a lot of the nut butters on the market, especially for exercise, they have actually a lot of them are actually all avocado oil based, which fantastic oil during the day and cooking and all that stuff. But here's the reason why I use coconut oil in my energy butter, because exactly what I just finished saying a
yeah,
few minutes ago, right? So
yeah,
we know coconut oil is an MCT, medium chain triglyceride, so you can actually use it faster. It usually decreases the incidence of GI distress. So if listeners, you're thinking about utilizing a fat source during training and maybe you're kind of a little bit gut shy, if you will, maybe start with an MCT. Well, whether it's my
yeah,
energy butter or not, but just look at like a coconut oil based product. That might be your first step just to test the waters out.
yeah. Oh, hey, Bob, that just reminded me, other than I was drooling,
Yeah.
thinking of the nut butter, the energy butters and the bites, but do our Patreon members that opt into our paid membership, do they get a savings on the All Around Snack Co?
Well, so funny you should ask. They sure do. They get
Uh-huh.
15% off anytime.
Okay, so this is a
So
reason to maybe join our Patreon and purchase a few options, items from the All Around Snack Co. and test out this whole fat consumption during your training and see how it goes.
exactly. And heading over to patreon.com/ISN podcast, because what do we do behind the scenes for our paid members?
Yeah, I mean, we've got some cool extra content we've been providing and video content,
Hmm.
interaction, some little direct messaging going on. So, a lot going on there behind the scenes, Bob, for our paid members, aside
And
from
if
some
you don't want to be
savings.
a paid member, and I think everyone knows this because hopefully you've been listening to our podcast for a while now, we're a non-sponsored podcast. So this is kind of why we're doing this. We're trying to drum up a few bucks so we can pay the people that it takes to produce our podcast. So we appreciate anything. But listen, if you just kind of want to hang out as a wallflower, you can still join as a free member and still interact with us and get some great value. So we would just encourage you to hop on over there no matter what you want to do. But if you want to throw a couple bucks at us each month, help us keep the pod going. We obviously certainly appreciate that also.
Yes. Well, good. One other thing, just thinking of this, Bob, to add on before we close out is a question that I get about fat burning. Like, I
Mm.
want to be a good fat burner, an
Oh, one of
efficient
my
fat
favorite
burner.
topics.
I
Yeah, keep
know.
going,
And
keep going.
so that question is, does that mean I must consume fat as my primary fuel source during exercise
Oh, what
to
does Dina say
maintain?
about that?
I would say your daily nutrition is where we put the impetus or the, main project, the main efforts. I feel like, though, I shouldn't say I feel like, but you can still support, as we've been talking, if you are consuming some fat, that is helping with blood sugar stabilization and so many other things. So it's not wrong, but it's not to say you only have to eat fat as your primary calorie source to maintain that level of, good substrate use or that good level of metabolic efficiency.
Yeah, well said. I definitely support that, and that most of your daily nutrition supports metabolic efficiency training.
Anything else you want to add, Bob?
No, I think we're
All
pretty
right.
spot on with that. I guess,
Okay.
just to sum up, I would say, listeners, just be careful if you're going to try utilizing fat during exercise because it does, it could be a shock to the system. Secondly, try a medium chain triglyceride based fat first because it's could be a little bit easier to digest. And then third, give yourself ample time before any competitive events just so you can start to tinker with things and see if it's actually going to work or not for your body.
All right, Bob, we will wrap up this episode. Listeners, thanks for being here, and we look forward to hearing your feedback. What's going on with you? Send us a note through our website or definitely join us over on our Patreon community. I'll just give the website one more time, Bob.
Uno más.
Patreon.com/ISN podcast, or hop on the Patreon app and find us ISN podcast. We will catch y'all on the next episode.